So hello and welcome back to the show. My guest today is one of my huge role models, Joel Salatin. We'll be talking about mainly how to source like high quality pork, but the underlying message of the podcast will be just food production practices in the U.S. in general. So basically, like, I grew up on a biodynamic farm in Ukraine, and when I moved here from Ukraine to the States, and I walked into a supermarket, I thought America has mastered biodynamic farming. I'm like, wow, because I didn't know the difference between, like, I didn't even know factory farming existed. So whenever I walked into a supermarket, I'm like, man, they've definitely mastered biodynamic farming if they can produce this much food. But then I think like 3 or 4 years ago, I ran into a guy named Paul Check and a video on YouTube called Dirt Facts. And that video basically gave an underlining kind of theme of food production practices in the U.S., and it kind of woke me up to see that there is like a huge difference between food that's produced, for instance, at the supermarket or factory farm food and biodynamically produced food. And then kind of to research further, I ran into Joel Salatin, my guest today, which I'm very proud of to be speaking with, and I kind of used his Joel Salatin semester series as like a blueprint or like a light tower to kind of gauge at good food production practices. So welcome to the show, Mr. Salatin. Thank you again for being a guest.
Thank you for having me. It's my delight, yes.
Yeah, so for the reader, purchasing pork is a very popular meat product, like a lot more popular than beef in the U.S. And I kind of wanted to talk to you today about just pork production practices and basically kind of, giving the reader enough knowledge to make the best choice in terms of what kind of pork they should be buying to optimize their own health, whether it's pork at the supermarket, the factory farm pork, or organic pork, or whether it's pork from a small local farmer and the various production practices of that. So I guess my first question to you is kind of, can you describe to the reader kind of the production practices that go into the typical, like, very cheap factory farm pork you would typically find at the supermarket?
Yeah, well, those systems, of course, are all in confinement. The animals are never outside. They never see sunshine. They never get fresh air. And they never can root in litter. They're always on some sort of a slatted floor, so their manure and urine goes down into a slurry pit underneath, which of course exudes ammonia up, and so it's like living 24/7 in the cap of a bleach bottle, and of course, footing becomes an issue because those slats, that slatted flooring, it makes it difficult for them to gain footing. It's not like the soil. It's not like a solid footing situation. So you got, that's a beginning of it. And then of course they're massive houses. They're not little 50 pig houses. They're 2,000, 3,000, 5,000 in a house. The sows are kept in very, very small crates, in individual little pens. They're not communal. Each one has its own little pen, sometimes so small that they can't even turn around. So they literally can stand up and lie and sit down, just lie down in the same spot, stand up, lie down in the same spot. They can't even turn end to end or anything like that. They're most, I would say, now in the big farms are artificially inseminated. There's no natural service, and of course they're given all sorts of hormones and things to synchronize their heat cycles so that a whole bunch can be impregnated at one time. Just to do batch work like that, and so then they're bred, and then they stay in the same crate. And then they have their babies, and it's the same situation. I mean, the babies can run around a little bit, but the babies go to one side and they nurse, and the sow can't really nuzzle them or do anything because she can't even turn around. so she can't do any of the regular maternal instinctual things that a mother would do for nosing, licking, snuggling, you know, all those kinds of things. And then a lot of times in the industry, those pigs, even as early as 4 weeks, even less, 3 weeks, are weaned, and then they're put on a special, you know, high octane ration to get going, and given shots and all, and their tail is cut off to make it a little bit sore, so that when they get into their cells, and so these pigs will be put in cells of, 50 to 100 pigs in a cell, and it's very, very crowded in that cell, and because there's nothing for them to do, they get bored easily, and so they pick on each other, and cutting off the tails, making the tails tender because they're a little bit wounded, it makes the pigs move away when somebody bites on their tail, move away quicker, you know, so they don't, so that the biter doesn't draw blood from the bitee, because if in this very bored, high stress situation, if one of them does begin to bleed for some reason, for a wound of any kind, often the others will literally eat him. I mean, they are omnivores, so they'll cannibalize, actually eat the wounded party, and that's that. And so then the pigs grow up in these pens, and when they get big enough, 240 pounds usually is kind of the industrial desired weight. Then they get processed by the thousands, and welcome to the modern industrial pork.
And can you talk about, kind of like you mentioned that the species-specific diet of a pig is kind of like an omnivore diet, but can you talk about the type of diet like a non-organic, like factory farm typically imposes on these pigs?
Yeah, well, I mean, the diet that the pig gets, the pig doesn't get anything really but protein and calories. They don't get grass, they don't get bugs, they don't get any of the, you know, whatever, bark and things that they would normally get, you know, caterpillars and worms and whatever they would normally get if they were outside. Even you know, our pigs gnaw on rocks. They enjoy gnawing on rocks. They get some minerals, and just why do they gnaw on rocks? I don't know why they gnaw on rocks. I just know that they enjoy it. And so none of this natural behavior or nutritional supplementation gets added. So the feed is a concentrate, minimalist, least cost, simplified feed to keep the pigs alive, make them grow as fast as they possibly can, and get the highest feed conversion possible.
And in terms of their feed, I mean, is it still is the industry still heavily reliant on like GMO corn and soy as the primary source of feed for these operations?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. That's standard practice. Genetically modified organisms are ubiquitous within the industry, and the pork industry, of course, is in with the grain industry. And so they all went to the same school. They all drank the same Kool-Aid, and so the idea of GMOs being wonderful is all part and parcel of the program.
Yeah, and the reason I bring that up is because a lot of people these days do kind of suffer from like joint issues or like depression or anxiety, or for instance, cancer is a big one these days as well. And I think like it's important for readers to understand that when, like for instance, an omnivore like a pig, for instance, is basically fed predominantly nothing but corn and soy, this kind of like offsets the natural balance of like omega-3 and omega-6. And it kind of shoots the omega-6 way up, causing like a lot of inflammation in people that kind of like eat that type of meat on a daily basis. Of course, it's not the only source of inflammation. Like low-grade stress is a huge huge component as well, but it's just like another thing that adds into the equation. So
sure, and beyond that, there's mounting evidence that the GMO grains are different. And when I say different, I don't mean different in a good way. I mean they're different, harder to digest, even some implications toward either infertility and or spontaneous abortion, different things. And so I think that we have not yet seen that whole thing play out. I think we're still discovering and learning some of the ramifications of these Franken crops.
Yeah, and even the stuff that's more obvious, like obviously the GMO corn and soy is grown with like a tremendous amount of glyphosate, and there has been a tremendous amount of research showing the negative health effects of getting exposure to that, and that kind of passes down to the kind of like the organs, the fat, and the meat of the pork, and then people that eat that also kind of get exposure to that as well. So.
Yes, that's correct. Yeah, it all adds up. You know, these things are cumulative, and you know, whenever anybody in the industry, whenever tests are done for FDA licensing or anything like that, whether it's pesticides, herbicides, glyphosate, GMOs, anything like this, all the tests are always done in isolation. We're going to test one product, one item, and we're going to test it in isolation. But in the real world, they're never used in isolation. They're used as cocktails. We mix things, and you mix your GMO corn with the glyphosate, and you mix it with the chemical fertilizer, and so in nature, in actual practical outworking, none of these things that have FDA approval are ever used the way they're used in the testing procedure. And I think that's one of the most unknown, unspoken realities in the entire food and farming sector, is this notion that not a single approved product is used in practice the way it was used in testing. It's just a profound truth, and one that should give everybody pause.
Yeah, and usually what you mean by saying that is usually the quantities they use are like far exceed what they use in a controlled laboratory. Is that correct to say?
No, well, I don't know about the volume. I'm just saying that in testing they're used singularly, and in practice they're used plurally, and so that's where the testing is actually not accurate to the practical working of it. You don't use a pesticide in isolation. You use it in a relationship with a chemical fertilizer, maybe with a weed killer, an herbicide, and we call this in practice, we call this cocktails. So you're accumulating a cocktail of interacting chemicals, and in testing, that is never the case. In testing, it's all the product is always tested in isolation, without regard to other things, and so the testing is never accurate to practice.
Yeah, so I'm guessing like if they use, let's just say like 5 different biocides growing that GMO corn, then trace amounts of that is going to make it, then the pigs are obviously going to eat that, then trace amounts of that is going to be deposited into the kind of the organs, the fat, the muscle fibers of the pork, and the person that eats it is also going to get exposure to those like 5 or 6 or 7 trace amounts of different biocides. And I guess it really does add up when you get exposure, especially to all sorts of other environmental toxins these days. Well, probably not you, since you're living in such a pristine environment, which kind of like I admire, but the average person.
Yeah, well, I mean, then you add, so that's going to go in a person's body and ingest it, and then it's going to add with maybe the person's on some, heart medication, or maybe they're on some medication, or they've got, maybe they're living in a place that has some sort of environmental issue, air pollution, smoke. I mean, so then you get that whole. Then you get that whole additional layer of things that the body brings to the table as well, and before you know it, you've got a whole cornucopia of interlinking negatives.
And can you also, in regards to kind of like different chemical inputs in factory farm produced pork, can you kind of go over the quantities of antibiotics used in like factory farm produced pork? Because I heard like they could have like up to 7 to 15 different types of antibiotics like per operation that they cycle through. Is that true? Like those quantities?
To tell you the truth, I'm not extremely well versed in what the industry uses, because we don't raise pigs that way. We don't use the products. I mean, I see a little bit of the literature. I see the advertising. I mean, I do get the I don't know why, but I get the Pork Checkoff magazine, and which is of course the industry mouthpiece. And I do flip through it and look at it, and I know that it's basically financed by drug companies, and they've got everything from drugs to keep a piggy from getting diarrhea to making a pig ovulate on time to reducing infection. There's a slew of them, and I don't know them all. I don't know how many of them are used, and I don't know what the residuals are. But you can be sure that they're pretty, they're pretty far out there.
Can you give any input? I know, like when you go to the supermarket and you kind of look at the label, they say like no drugs or steroids used. But can you kind of give an input of like the sneaky nature of if it's even used in the industry anymore? If like ractopamine is used anymore?
Yeah, I know that was real hot about 5 or 6 years ago, and I'm not sure if it's in or out now. I just don't live in that world, so I can't give you definitive information on that. But as far as labeling is concerned, there is all sorts of clever speak around labeling, like natural, or the reason that they can't put drug free is because pigs do emit drugs. You can't say hormone free because pigs do make hormones. You and I make hormones, and so the in its wisdom, the FDA won't allow somebody who has a completely I'll just say clean pig from using terms like drug-free or hormone-free or chemical-free because we make chemicals in our bodies. The pig makes chemicals in their bodies. This is the kind of parsing that the government does. And so you have to say none added. In other words, none beyond nature added. And so that's hopefully means that whatever's in there was just in there as part of the natural body. But things like natural, things like range, range raised. Well, what kind of range? I mean, organics. I had a conversation with a guy who was organic certified recently, and he said he thought it was anti-ecological to raise pigs on anything but concrete. He raises his organic pigs in outdoor concrete pens, so they have outdoor access. And normally, when a person hears outdoor access, they think, well, they must be on pasture. They're out here. No. It just means there's some sort of a concrete apron with poop all over it that gets sprayed down with water once a day, and the pigs can run around on concrete on a kind of a patio apron kind of thing. So you just can almost not conceive of the cleverness and the wordsmithing involved in labeling, which is why people like me say, know your food, know your farmer. The truth is, you don't have to get your meat from the supermarket. You really don't. And there are enough really good, let's put it this way, if everybody who was concerned about it would patronize their local farmer, A, we'd have a lot more local farmers, and B, we'd have a lot bigger, more financially, viable local farmers. And both of those would be a good thing.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for tuning into the podcast. I'm curious, have you ever been confused by the labels in the grocery store? In Yevgeny's book, he demystifies the difference between caged, cage-free, free-range, and pasture-raised meats. He also covers how to avoid GMOs, source high-quality water, fish, supplements, and other related topics. It's a beautifully illustrated, non-technical read that comes with a comprehensive video series and other extended learning materials. Jump on Amazon and check out the book titled Anti-Factory Farm Shopping Guide by Eugene Trufkin. Now let's dive back into the podcast.
Gotcha. I know sometimes I give grocery store tours, and a lot of people, to teach people about food production practices, and a lot of times people will come to me and they'll go during the tour like, oh, I purchased organic pork at the supermarket, and I think that's like very, very deceptive. And can you kind of give the listener kind of more background of what really goes into supermarket level organic pork?
Yeah, well, it certainly isn't the kind of pork you would imagine. It's essentially factory pork, and even the grain used in it, which has to be organic certified. There's a tremendous amount of fraud in that right now as well. If you're familiar with what's going on with organic grain imports, more than 50% of the organic grain used in America is imported, and much of it comes through Istanbul, Turkey, and it comes from the Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, the stands over there in Eastern Europe, and there's been a tremendous amount of fraud where, that grain comes into port and somebody puts a few stamps on the paperwork and it comes in regular and leaves organic headed for the U.S. And this has been an ongoing problem. And so here on our farm, we get GMO free. We don't worry about organic certified. That has become pretty much a government program, and with a lot of dubious elements to it. And so we get GMO-free local grain from farmers that we know, and the batches are actually checked for glyphosate residue and pesticide and chemical residue. So there is in many cases there is I'll just say this, a more organic option than the industrial organic option in the supermarket. You have to realize that the regular supermarkets, now, are there some small family chains that do a great job? Yes, there are, but they're very, very small little family type outfits. The average supermarket, we're talking about Kroger's and Walmart and Safeway and whatever, Piggly Wiggly and those kinds of things, the big ones. Their purchasing practices are such that small-scale, truly authentic, the kinds of producers that you and I would consider authentic, simply can't get in there. You can't get the volume, the stipulations at one time, all of the sophisticated techno tracking numbers and things like that, and the slow pay. supermarkets are notoriously slow pay outfits, often up to 120 days. And so lots of times the vendors actually finance the supermarket. I mean, it's a horrible system for farmers. And so most of us farmers, can't wait to get paid for 120 days because the feed mill wants to get paid in 30, and we just can't run our pipelines out that far. So there are all sorts of ways that the industrial food system, and that's the large supermarkets, creates hurdles so that small players, local players, neighborhood players, can't get into them.
Gotcha. Well, since you kind of did touch on the subject that there are more sources of meat outside of the supermarket, can you kind of go over, I guess, since factory farm pork at the supermarket isn't that great, and the organic pork at the supermarket also isn't that great or healthy for you, but if they do go to a small farmer, can you kind of go over the various types of small farming operations, kind of like, because I know probably there are some farmers that aren't that great, some farmers that are the best or a lot better, that produce a lot healthier meat. So can you kind of go over like the various, I guess, levels of pasture-raised pork? Or if it's even raised on pasture, because I produce like some of these small farmers also just raise them in pens sometimes, correct?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Just call it levels of integrity. I would say, let me answer the question this way, if you don't mind. I'll just say, here are things you want to look for. Here are things you want to look for when you go visit and you're vetting. When you're vetting your pork, here's what you want to see. The main thing is that you want to see grass in the pen. You don't want to see a moonscape. Everybody that's raised a pig knows exactly what I'm talking about. Because they can dig so aggressively than a chicken. And, of course, herbivores, sheep, cow, goats, they don't dig at all. And so they can certainly, overgraze something, and you can have overgraze short grass. But a pig can not only eat the grass, they can actually plow it up and till it. And so pigs can do a tremendous amount of disturbance that no other animal can do. And as a result, the actual movement, the amount of time, the amount of impaction on a single spot, the movement is what's critical. And so the first thing and the most important thing that I look for in a pig operation is, where's the rotation? How fast are they moving the pigs, paddock to paddock, and what do the paddocks look like? Now, it's certainly true that when they vacate a paddock, it might look torn up. But look at the one before then. What's the recovery? Because if a pig, if it rains a bunch overnight and the soil gets soft, pigs can tear up a lot really, really quick, and it can look kind of rough. That's a specific condition, a specific time, specific happenstance. So just because you go and you see a dirt paddock doesn't mean things are bad. What you're looking for is, where's the paddock they came from? How long have they been in here? And that sort of thing. And because actually sometimes it's really good to tear up a paddock. You might be wanting to plant something different, or even plant vegetables there. Use the pigs as a plow. So there are reasons to till up something with a pig. But you don't want to be there very long, and you want to see, well, what did they do in the previous one? How's it coming back? And in general, you want to see a mosaic of forage that's in paddocks that the pigs have not come to yet, that are at rest, and you want to see forage recuperating and growing in paddocks that the pigs have recently left. And so it's all about vegetation on the pig paddocks that determines, whether the pigs are are being handled correctly or not.
Gotcha. And is there like a specific, I guess, number of pigs per acre a person can look for, like just to know that it's not like overcrowded or?
Not really, because it all depends on movement. In other words, if I'm going to move them every day, I can run the pigs way more densely than if I'm not. For example, when we first began with pigs, I made a 12-foot, I think, was it? Yeah, I think it was 12 feet by 20 feet. I called it the Tenderloin Taxi, and it was either 20 by 20 or 12 by 20. I'm not sure which, but anyway, it was just a pin that I made on some poles. Just put the poles on the ground, and it had a chain on the front, and I'd pull it along with a tractor. And I put 4 pigs in there and moved it every day. And if we got rain, I moved it twice a day. And those 4 pigs in that little area, they would tear up an area in a day. I planted barley and oats behind them, and got some wonderful stands. And it worked very well. That was high density, but it was very, very short duration. So it makes a big difference. So you can't just say, X number of pigs per acre. It also makes a difference on what your rainfall is. Are you on high ground, low ground? What kind of vegetation do you have? Are you dealing with annuals or perennials, or even woody or tree species? All of those factors go into it. So I just keep coming back to vegetation. What does the vegetation look like? And are the pigs, stimulating vegetation? Are they creating vegetation, or is the whole thing turning into a moonscape?
And do you have like any tips for the listener of like what they could ask the small farmer in terms of like if they're feeding the pigs like a species specific diet that's going to kind of maximize the nutrient quality of the pork?
Well, yeah, you can certainly ask the farmer what they're feeding, and I mean we give our ration out to anybody. So you're not only looking at ingredients, you're looking at provenance of the ingredients. So yeah, we feed our pigs oats and corn and whole roasted soybeans and an organic high lysine mineral supplement because pigs can't metabolize lysine out of corn, and so we give them that. We give them some diatomaceous earth as a natural wormer as well, and so we're happy to share our ration with anybody. But then beyond that, you want to know, well, where did the ration come from? Is it GMO? Is it is it from imports? Where did it come from? Where's the provenance of the feed? So you got 2 issues: not only what is it, but where did it come from?
And do you know if like the nutritional profile of pork is increased if, like, for instance, the pigs are fed like a decent amount of like chicken, for example, or some kind of meat versus like grains or the other vegetations or vegetables or fruits you mentioned? If you fed them kind of, I guess, more of like a strict like omnivore diet where it's a well balance between like a decent amount of meat but less like vegetables and fruit, does anyone do that?
Well, certainly gleaning. I mean, pigs are scavengers. Pigs are closer to us than any other animal, and so they can actually eat an extremely wide range of stuff like people and do very, very well. For example, in the Alps, pigs are pretty much raised 100% on whey. You can raise very, very healthy, happy pigs on nothing but whey, which is, of course, the byproduct. It's the liquid byproduct from cheese making. Back when we used to milk a couple family cows, we always raised a couple pigs a year, primarily on milk, and we always had extra milk. And I'll tell you what, there's nothing like pigs and milk. And of course, garden waste. I mean, from weeds to squash. I mean, pigs will eat beans and squash and pumpkins. Plenty of people, go and try to scrounge up pumpkins after Halloween, and toss them into the pigs. The pigs will eat all of that. A lot of apple, salvage apples, rotten apples, pumice, vineyard pumice, like grape pumice, left over from squeezing grapes that have the seeds and the hulls in them. Oh my, pigs will just eat that just up the wazoo. And so pigs and salvaged either spoiled food or food, processing tailings like whey or peelings and pumice and things have been, a mainstay of pig diet over the years, as well as nut trees, nut drops. I mean, the reason Virginia, the colonial Virginians and the pig industry, they didn't feed their pigs corn. They fed them, the pigs fattened on chestnuts from the American chestnut. And, today we have acorn glens up in the woods, and we run our pigs up there in the fall, and, we can't do it for all of them, but for the fall pigs, they fatten on a ration of, we've had them actually go days in a row and never even touch the feeder. All they're doing is eating acorns, and they're beautiful. They're they're very happy and do well. So a pig is extremely feedstock versatile, and they are omnivores. But if you get something nutritional like acorns or whey or milk or grape pumice, which has a lot of seeds in it, if you get something like that, they can do very well on almost a single item if it's got that if it's got a wide profile.
And what's the kind of production time frame between, like, how long does it take to raise like typical factory farm pig versus kind of the way you're doing it, like from start to finish?
Our pigs grow probably 20 to 25% slower, and much of that is because they're getting exercise. And now, what's really fascinating to me is that one of the things that gives pork, well, all meats, moisture content is exercise. So on a chicken, the drumstick and thigh are more moist than the breast. So in general, when you talk about meat, exercise makes it tougher but moist, and lack of exercise makes it tender but dry. And so I'll tell you a story. My father-in-law, who's almost 90, grew up on their farm raising pigs. Almost every farm around here had pigs. They also had, about 6 to 10 dairy cows, and so the pigs were always there to get salvage from spoiled milk and things. This is, before refrigeration was on every farm and rural electrification and all that. Anyway, his little pig house has a 24-inch, a 2-foot high threshold. So the pigs would run out in this lot, and their feeder and shade and water and stuff were in this little pig house, and they had to jump up this 24-inch threshold to get up in there. And I asked my father-in-law, I said, why? Why didn't you just let them run in there? Why did you put that high thing? I had to jump up. He said, because jumping up on that threshold exercised their hams and made the hams way more moist, and it made them taste way better. Also, the exercise stimulated blood flow, which brought more iron to the hams, and exercise stimulates the hemoglobin in the blood and takes more iron around. And pigs are very susceptible or very responsive to that, to the exercise more than almost any other animal in making them a lot better. So the ability to get out in the sunshine, run around, and what I call dance and gambole, that is as valuable for the taste, texture, and nutritional density of pork, not to mention, happy animal. That is as valuable for the nutritional components and as the actual diet.
Gotcha. And then two more quick questions for the listener. What do you do? What's your procedure like if pigs get sick, for instance?
If they get sick?
Yeah, I don't know. Do they get sick in the wild?
Yeah, the number one tonic for pigs, and then, we've used this for years, and I got it out of some old farm books that I've saved. I always look at their old husbandry sections. And if you get any swine book prior to, that was published prior to like 1930, and you look at you go into the veterinary care stage of that book, it will start, the first thing it'll say is charcoal. And we've made charcoal feeders and fed sick pigs or poorish looking pigs charcoal. I mean, in a week, they're the best looking pigs on the planet. It's just the number one tonic for anything, and pigs love charcoal. They'll eat it by the handful, and it's really, really good for them.
Gotcha. And then the last question before we end the conversation is, do you feel it's still like really tough for like a farmer like you to compete against like these huge factory farms? Do you feel like it's getting kind of worse, or is it getting better?
Oh, it's hard to say. I mean, in some ways it's getting better because people know more about that. If it is getting worse, it's only getting worse because government regulations make it more difficult for small abattoirs to stay in business because the regulations are quite scale discriminatory. They discriminate against small outfits and concessionize large ones. But I think the actual awareness among people is better now than it used to be, which is very positive. And obviously people like you spreading the word, that's a great thing. So I think when you say factory pork, the average person doesn't look at you with eyes glazed over like they used to 20 years ago. I think there's a growing understanding of what factory pork means. I mean, things like Omnivore's Dilemma, and Michael Pollan saying, if they put glass on these confinement houses, almost everybody would be a vegetarian, and I think there's a lot of truth to that. So the awareness is a good thing, but we still have price is a big deal, convenience is a big deal, and just the whole idea that I buy my food from Walmart. I mean, that's the single. People ask me, what's the biggest hurdle that we have to overcome, and my answer is inertia. Just inertia. What we're familiar with, the power of familiarity, the power of the incumbency is just incredibly strong. What you recognize, name recognition, and we've now created a couple of generations now where you get food at the store, and so we have to de-learn that and completely reinvent where you're supposed to get food. And the butcher, the baker, and the candlestick maker nested in the village. That's a thing of the past. And with Uberization, we're bringing it back, but it's still a slow uphill climb.
Are a lot of small farmers offering like home delivery now? Because I noticed there are two around where I live in Southern California that have like pasture-raised operations, and they offer like home delivery. Is that becoming like more common to kind of provide that convenience variable? Oh,
absolutely, as well as shipping. I mean, we're now shipping nationwide. So if you wanted pork from Polyface, we could ship it to you tomorrow. And so the logistics of distribution have changed, as you know, dramatically in the last 20 years. Things that would have been completely uneconomical 20 years ago are now actually in the ballpark, and the whole bricks and mortar retail interface is struggling for market share and for continued credibility in the space. And so that's where we are, and it'll be an interesting next 20 years to see where it all goes.
Gotcha. Well, thank you for being on the show. I would like to, first of all, thank you a tremendous amount for being kind of like a light tower of information for me when I was trying to kind of understand food production practices in the U.S. Because I feel like you're one of the farmers that really put a lot of effort into, giving a lot of speeches, being on, for instance, the Joe Rogan show, doing endless amounts of YouTube videos, and that really kind of helped me navigate, the path in terms of what good food production practices should look like. So I would like to thank you for that. And is there any website or any source of information, if a listener wants to know more about you, that they can go to?
Sure. Our website is Polyface Farms. That's all one word, Polyface Farms, Polyface Farms, and you just put that in, and website will pop up. It's got all sorts of stuff on it, lots of links and different things. Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Salatin. I appreciate our conversation. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks for tuning into the podcast. If you've ever had trouble losing weight, or you've lost weight, but still didn't have the ideal body or health you're aiming for, please feel free to reach out anytime and book an assessment. Eugene will work with you to cover your goals in detail, see what's holding you back, and go from there. In the meantime, feel free to check out the countless testimonials on Eugene's website in the link below. In the testimonial section, you'll notice everyone has various backgrounds, are of all different ages, and all have had different challenges in their life, but they all have one thing in common: they were all able to find their health and achieve their ideal body. You're also welcome to add yourself to the Facebook group in the link below. There you'll have access to the live videos that Eugene does weekly on Sundays, and other helpful content. Thank you again for tuning in.